Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Hello, everyone. I'm really honored to introduce today's guest. He's someone that spent over a decade working to improve the lives of low-income New Yorkers, a U.S. Army veteran, a board member for NYC Water, someone who's dedicated to eliminating education barriers that keep so many from a career in tech. He's the co-founder and CEO at Pursuit. Pursuit's intensive fellowship program trains people to become software developers. People who go through the Pursuit program go from earning an average of $18,000 a year to over $90,000 a year working as software engineers at some of the best companies in the world. Please welcome Jukay Hsu.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me.
Great. It is great to have you. I've been excited for this for a while. So let's jump right into it. First question. What's one thing you've done at Pursuit, big or small, that had the biggest impact and that you will absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future?
I was thinking about this, and I think it would have to be the idea of communal rituals. I actually wish I was more intentional about doing that earlier. We have a bunch of communal rituals at Pursuit. I mean, you shared a little about what we do at Pursuit, but something I think that is maybe distinctive is that we have many different kind of customers and kind of stakeholders to kind of do what we do. And so this idea of communal activity to is really kind of important. So some examples of that is, a lot of our focus on helping people get jobs for starting a new career. So when that happens, we have an event that creates a celebration moment for that. And that integrates many different kinds of people in the organization, in our community. And it's a shared experience, even though people coming from very different places and very different perspectives.
When did that start? When did that ritual start?
That's a good question. I don't know, maybe a few years in. It kind of evolved over time. It was different in person than during COVID on Zoom and online for both good and bad. And I wonder what we're gonna do again now that we're pretty much shifting back in person. So
Can you
yeah.
describe the ritual a little bit? Because
Oh
I've
sure,
seen the
yeah, yeah,
ritual and
yeah.
like I think it's before we ever met, actually. I watched a video online
Is that right? I
and
didn't know that.
saw,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that was one of the things where, I mean, I'll be honest, I got goosebumps, watching that video.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's very simple, but I guess giving some everyone contacts. So we're focused on helping create these good jobs and primarily working with adults from working class backgrounds. Maybe you were a retail worker before, or maybe you were an Uber driver, maybe you work in hospitality. So whatever you're doing in your life, your 20s, 30s, 40s, or whatever kind of age, and people are dedicating themselves over multiple years to kind of make a transformation in that. Um, and so at the moment of a new job and career, it may be a year, 2 years, some other time later when you started down this journey. And so, it's a big deal. It's a big moment. You highlight it. So different ways how it's a big deal. Um, you highlighted, David, how a person on average is earning about $18,000 before Pursuit. Upon that first job, you're earning on average right now it's about $94,000. That's
Amazing.
transformative, obviously, and it's there. So, one thing is a celebration, obviously, and recognizing that. And, again, that might take a couple years, but really, I think what it's about also, so it's very simple. The individual, we call the individuals that go through our program, fellows, um, speaks about their experience and almost gives like a life, like what it took for that person to get there. So there's a little setup introduction. There's, a celebration. And I think what's powerful for people sometimes is that just hearing about, yeah, just people's life journeys and what they've overcome and what this means for them and that's still the beginning of what a career is. I know here we're talking about CEOs and companies, but we're on these paths, right? And just
Mm,
hearing these kind of major milestones for that, and including this as not just an individual, but really, the company, the employer that, that's joining and the people involved there. And, people that might have interviewed this person or were working with them on the team now, like had no idea, to the person's instructors, to family members, to all these other folks that have touched a person along the way. And then you also see, it's one person's journey, but what do we all contribute to that and how we all part of a similar journey and what that means.
mhm.
So, yeah, I think sometimes it's very emotionally resonant and powerful. So,
It's very, I mean, the first time, so I came to demo day, I went and looked. It was November of 21.
wow. Yeah.
And I remember coming to demo day and seeing this group present. I saw all the groups present, and I remember distinctly one of the people she was a hairdresser before, and then she had started to learn, through the fellowship program, learn how to code, and was presenting this application that her and her team built and telling her story. And I just remember saying, wow, this, now I've been to a couple demo days since then. And the stories are amazing. The products that they build are amazing. You almost can't imagine, and I guess the demo day is another ritual
Yeah.
really
Right.
in the
Yeah.
motion that you guys do.
Right. Totally. Absolutely. Like the communal, and that's also another communal experience, right? It's the individual, but then who are all the people otherwise involved in that? And it's this other kind of milestone. The milestones are really important. And so that's something we started doing in the beginning. Um and it's tweaking, in tech, obviously there's these classic product launches and demo days, but I think the difference for us in this tweaking it to what does it mean for an individual and what is their background and story and what is the trajectory and how other people contribute that. And then that becomes more communal also in a way. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think you've done a great job with, at least from what I can tell, is getting amazing mentors, employees, board members kind of surrounding Pursuit,
Mm,
and helping, in
mm,
this journey. We've never talked about this. I'm curious how do you get those people? How do you go and recruit because the people who
yeah.
work at Pursuit are so about the mission,
Yeah.
and the board members and the mentors. Like, how do you do that? How have you? I can't imagine that's easy.
Yeah. Thank you, dude. Yeah. I feel really lucky that to work with really passionate people and some great people. And I don't know if there's one way, I think because we're mission driven, I think people are doing it because of that and what drives that, even though people come from maybe different perspectives and kind of backgrounds. So um, I think people draw upon other people, right? So whether for you, what really resonated, it seems like you really remember, wow, this person's a hair, like, what is that person's story? That's amazing, right? 3.5 years later, well, actually, yeah, 3 years later, like, what is that? You still remember a person that, um, and the juxtaposition of that context. So I think it really draws people. I think that's one thing. And I, I think it's also trying to solve something really hard. Draws people that want to solve for that challenge. And other people bring in good people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you start Pursuit,
I started pursuing 2011, so I May of 2011.
and how long did it take to get momentum going? When would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're still doing it. It's so honestly, it's but it's evolved a lot. The mission's been the same, but for the first 3 years, I thought it'd initially be I thought it'd be a 3-month project initially, and it'd be a side project to learn before I built like what I really wanted to build.
Mm,
And then going through it and working on the kind of the problem that, we're tackling at the time, I just kind of went deeper and deeper and deeper, and it just kept going. But what Pursuit's doing for now, our training program with this focus on creating jobs, um, the mechanisms for doing that didn't start till, 2.5 years in, actually.
Mm.
So I would say 3 to 4 years that really like kind of then decided, wow, this is the way, a tangible way of solving for the kind of direction and mission that we're doing, and then started finding different ways of doing that. So I would say, yeah, a few years. And I think, we have these long cycles for what we do, so still learning here. And I hope this is another kind of inflection point to get things going.
You one of the things that I noticed, again, I've been to a number of these events now, and you have amazing corporate partners and people who want to work with the fellows or hire the fellows when they come out of the program. Is that I for me that feels like such a core piece,
Yeah.
I believe, of the program.
Yeah.
Um, how long did it take to find that,
Yeah,
to
to do that.
understand that
Yeah.
dynamic? Does that make, maybe you can explain a little bit about it, and then,
It's a question. That's it's interesting you note that. I think again, I think it's something we're still learning, but that is fundamental. It is actually fundamental. So we have a lot of corporate partners in different ways, whether Google or BlackRock, Blackstone, Citi, Uber, Peloton, Union Square Ventures, and Andreessen Horowitz. They're all partnered in different ways. All of those financially for jobs and other ways as well. And I think that's really something important for us to build upon. And so I think it was intentional, but I don't know how explicit it was initially for folks. In that it's actually a main driver of what we do. And what I mean by that is, let's say there's a partner that supports it financially, but beyond that, um, I think oftentimes from the outside looking in, people may think naturally that what we're doing is teaching how to code. And that is true, but actually the first order problem is not that. If you imagine, so we're focused on, 2/3 of Americans don't have a 4-year college degree, right? Anyone can learn to code for free online. You can go on YouTube right now, their content, right? Or Code Academy or these other things. So, um, actually, if you're a hairdresser, like you're saying, or these other things, like maybe if you had other barriers, or if you not completed college, there's actually these other first order kind of issues that we're solving for. And let's say
Mm,
someone is trained and has all the skills and capabilities after a while to doing that. Um, so much of jobs is also around like confidence and networks and kind of the brands to signal the success of what happens. So I think incorporating the corporate partners not only signals that, I mean, there's reality there. Also, people have to be capable, but it helps overcome something like a 4-year degree that a person doesn't have. And also a lot of the learning, like how to understand a working tag, for example. The best way to do that, I think humans are social animals, right? We learn through others. So I think the best way for us to build our community and actually to achieve a result is by incorporating the best from industry. And by
mm,
doing that, they're the ones kind of through, they may not even seem explicit, but you understand the norms, the practices, of what happens. And that is what enables us to do what we do and enables our fellows to be successful and kind of learn, even though sometimes that does not seem or that might not be initially what intuition tells you.
so even since we've met, I think you're always trying to evolve as
Hmm.
CEO and evolve the business. And how how has your job changed since you started
Yeah.
the organization? Because it's been a while and you've gone through a number of iterations.
Yeah. Yeah.
How has your role changed?
I think it's constantly changing. I'm trying to make a lot of changes now for what I do and also for the organization. I think right now we're maybe about 60 people in terms of size. So it's one thing to think about the different changes in that. So it's so small. We're trying to double in size in terms of team size. So lots of change around that. What does that mean? Um, Also other changes. We have a nonprofit. We also have a public benefit corporation for profit. We have like these different tools to solve the problem. And I think how I've been changing, hopefully, is trying to respond to what's the root problem that we're solving for, and how does our product and service in the organization evolve with that.
Hmm.
But some very simple things like just to like some like I didn't know how to raise any funds, initially, and did not do it at all, right? So for you, we're just doing it without doing that. Everyone's a volunteer. We're just doing it, trying to solve for something, build what we're doing. So even initially changing that, like, wow, my first job obviously is I need to capitalize the organization and make sure we don't run out of cash. So simple as a concept, but you know, that's not something I knew how to do, and no one teaches you how to do that. I think, at least I didn't know how to do that. And so at every point, I think it depends on what was needed. Um, and recognize that's what had to be done in doing that. I think now, I guess so much of it is around, I mean, always it's about team building, but how does that kind of evolve and how do we, I think I'm trying to make some intentional shift for my own leadership style and culturally in the business and the organization for how we think about the next decade, been reflecting on the past decade for our work and what does the next decade require? I think it'll be some fundamental things. I'll need to change what I do.
How do you stay sane, given, everything that you have going on? How do you stay organized? Like, even just if you think about your team structure, or do you
Yeah.
have any help around you? Like, how do you keep things running? Because I do think 60, 100, that area is, like, in my opinion, that's a tough place, because you're both in the weeds and kind of out there doing the fundraising and doing the strategic stuff. And
Yeah, totally.
how do you handle that?
I think it's just, I don't know. I think you're right. I've noticed that, because there's always very tactical to strategic at a lot of different roles. And it's hard sometimes for anyone to kind of flex within that. I think that's just, I don't know, over the years, it's like, well, I think I've done. And I think another thing about Pursuit is there's a staff size, but we also have all these other stakeholders. There's staff. We have, obviously we have different kinds of funders. We have donors, we have investors, we have customers that pay for services. And that may be kind of common with multiple kind of groups there. We have volunteers, be part of our extended staff community.
Hmm.
We have employers. So just, we have multiple boards. So just a lot of people overall to kind of manage and understand. Um, I'm trying to be as intentional as I can about what do I need to focus on and what stakeholders do I engage and how do we build a team where there's responsibility for different stakeholders. But I'm really interested in piloting things and testing things. So I know that's not a real
Mm,
answer, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
think I really enjoy learning and always learning from others. That's why I'm interested in this too. I can't wait to listen to the other podcasts as well about what others do but I don't think there's one right style or approach for any person or for any particular, and also not, and it's also for the moment. So,
I agree. I agree
yeah,
with that complete. I actually think that's such a good statement of, there isn't there isn't a right way, right? There are some best practices, and but we were talking about this, the other day, where I think one-on-ones is a big
yeah, yeah,
topic,
yeah,
where I remember having dinner with a CEO who said to me, very successful public company, who used to work at Salesforce, and he said to me, Dave, I don't do one-on-ones.
yeah, totally.
I don't do them.
Yeah,
And I said, you don't do any? I do them weekly for an hour with, with
I
every
know.
direct
Yeah,
report.
yeah.
And I tried to go away from it. And for me personally, I enjoyed it. But there's some very well known, very successful CEOs who don't do it.
Who don't do it? Yeah,
Um,
exactly. There's different styles, right? And it's a different approaches,
yeah.
or it's a very industry thing. I think approach too. I mean, um, it's I think in technology or technology oriented sectors it is, but I was in the military, very different, obviously in terms of the management approaches and styles, right? There were less one. I mean, there's kind of Yeah, it's like less like I mean, there's very structured performance management, but it was less like a weekly one-on-one was how one engage or I was talking to someone else. Like I think in like things like finance or something, like if you're an investment banker as an analyst, you just kind of call it's just constant, it's not like a formalized kind of practice. So well, I don't know what it's like for a doctor, but I think there's different modes of work and how does one approach it. And I believe in the one-on-one, but I've been experimenting with other norms to think about different ways to approach work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you a question that I ask everyone. What is the biggest challenge you've ever faced at Pursuit, and were you able to overcome it? How?
I think there have been a lot of challenges, and I think that's what is both the challenge and what's exciting is always just I think the job is just like problem solving all the time, and it always feels um like something. I mean, one natural one is just, COVID was such a huge disruptor to our work in a number of ways. One, we were all in person, think about going remote and changing dramatically would do. I know many companies and organizations did that. I think my biggest word at the time was what was the impact on our fellows, our community.
Mm-hmm.
It was much easier for staff to go remote because we have, computers and not everyone had computers, but, it was just easier. You could see that. But um, I think it was a very different circumstance for our fellows at the time. And I remember going class and class, and I was like very resistant to going to remote initially, even though staff did. Um, because people may not have the space at home, right? You may not have internet access. You may have other things. And I remember what it was like for me growing up as a kid, and what I would have wanted. And, you know, before going like, kind of remote on kind of a program level, what we did, like, went across every class. And the first question from our fellows and asking was always like can I still come here? Can you stay, can we back in person?
Really?
Yeah, yeah, and that was and I think that really surprised a lot of people. But I kind of felt like that would be the reaction. Um, and I think people were just coming from a different place in mind at the time, and that was I think that was like deeply resonant, because one could think like remote is easier. Wow, you have to commute all this way. But it's like thinking about, at least again, going from what I remember as a growing up, I went to high school downtown. I grew up in Queens. I went to high school downtown. It was like an hour and a half commute each way. It was like a 3 hour commute. And sometimes that amazes people, but I don't, and it was just seemed very normal at the time. And I think like being in such a different environment, and I grew up in some like a, very kind of humble, Puerto Rican kid from Queens, kind of background. Um, I think that being in a different kind of environment and space changed a lot of things and kind of and it's and it was really important. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about you. You mentioned your background a little bit. So from Queens originally, where was your family from? You
Yeah, it's family from Taiwan. So I was born in Taiwan, immigrated when I was 3 years old, and so a lot of family there. Yeah.
and you came straight to Queens.
Yeah. Straight to Queens, and then
And
yeah.
what'd your parents do?
My parents divorced when I was very young. And so oddly enough, my dad originally came to the US for graduate school for a degree in computer science, actually. He was getting a PhD. Although he never finished it, but he's very close. But I was raised mostly by my mom, because my parents got divorced. Very different kind of circumstance, and my mom did kind of different kinds of jobs. It kind of amazes me reflecting back, like, and talking to her later on about like what she did, in her life. And she ultimately went back to school when she was 40 years old and became a social worker. And she really enjoyed the job. Her first professional
Wow.
job as a social worker when she was 46. And thinking about that, like that had made a huge difference in my life, and how that impacted me. But I didn't really make the connection, I think, around like what the jobs mean for people, and like, and a broader basis for us. But yeah, so she was a social worker for 20 years and then, retired, right
Wow.
before COVID. Yeah.
And when you were growing up, did you want to be in technology? Did you want to be a CEO? Did you want to
I
be an entrepreneur? Like,
I didn't know. I was, I was interested in cities. I wanted to be an architect because I thought architects built cities. I know it's like very literal. Like we don't know how stuff works, and I'm like, oh, architects design, but who builds cities? Real estate developers build cities. Elected officials build cities. I don't know. The investors that fund real estate projects build cities. I don't know. The local residents build cities because they oppose projects. They have control. I don't know who builds cities, but you think about these things. So, but I was really interested in that. And then later on, I became very academically focused. So I wanted to be an economist. I was really interested in how like the economy and how society works. And I thought, because I didn't know anything about like most professions and careers, I thought like, oh, you study something and you become good at it, and then you figure out what, that was the best path. So those are the things I was interested in.
interesting. And
Yeah.
where'd you go to school?
I went to Harvard.
And when you came out of Harvard, what did you do when you came out of school?
Well, originally I wanted to be an academic, like I said, but, realized, so obvious, but like academia doesn't necessarily translate to the real world. And so at the end of college, decided to join the military. So I joined the Army. I was an infantry officer for 4 years. This would be 3 years, but ended up being 4 years. And yeah, that's what I did after college.
And where were you during that period?
It was kind of all over. I was in Georgia for a little while. I know we talked about, a little bit of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then I was stationed in Hawaii, and then I spent a year in Iraq. So I had a deployment there for a year.
And so you came back, and then how long between that and pursuit?
It was almost immediate. I thought I wanted to do something different. Seeing how technology is changing everything, changing every sector in our economy and society, every industry. I was interested in how it affected the issues I care about in terms of, civic things and cities. And so I thought I'd create like a civic tech company. But
Mm.
got really sidetracked when I moved back to New York, and then just kept going. So it was kind of, yeah, moved back and then started working on what's now Pursuit.
We've talked about it. It's been ups and downs. It's always challenging. Um, what what drives you? What keeps you motivated? Um, like deep down at the core, what is it that drives you?
I think that we'll give two answers to that. I think the answer, both are real answers, but the first one's gonna sound kind of cheesy. I think I wanna, I would like to make the biggest impact I can make in my life and how to maximize that. And that's what I want to optimize for. I think at various points in my career or even with pursuit, are we doing the right thing? Should I be doing something else? And those kind of questions. It always goes back to that question. Am I doing that or not? Um, I think more broadly, but regardless of whether like if I'm achieving that, pursuit's achieving that, I've realized recently, I'm really grateful in that, to work on something I really believe in. It doesn't feel like work. It just feels like things I'm interested in, care about, and solving things. And so I think problem solving is something I'm really interested in. That
Mm.
drives me also. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's actually the problem solving is interesting because when you talked before about kind of constantly trying, testing new things, I think that probably does speak
Yeah.
to that part of your brain and motivation of just try. Like I actually think problem solving, I say sometimes, it's a little like a game, when you think about work in a lot of
Hmm.
ways and
Yeah.
and building a business, it's like, you're constantly being thrown these different puzzles and challenges, and you get some kind of like dopamine hit almost every time you unlock something.
Absolutely.
Um, how many people have gone through the pursuit program? How many fellows have there been?
We're still working with people, but about nearly 1,000. Maybe it's like 900 or something. I should know the exact number, but nearly 1,000. Yeah.
So yeah, when you think about making an impact, I mean that's because not the 1,000 people, right? It's 1,000 people plus all the family members, and it's all the generations to come after it. It's It's amazing. Knowing everything you know now and the experience you've had and the career you've had, what advice would you give yourself at the very beginning of your career? You know, like when you just started, maybe even when you're at Harvard, like what advice would you tell yourself back then, knowing what you know today?
Well, if it was in college, I didn't know. I didn't know like I didn't know what a career was. I think I've always just picked my path, things I've been interested in doing that. I think more broadly, I should be more I think at various points in time, this is a weird thing to say, maybe, perhaps, but be more unapologetic sometimes of what I believe and what I'm trying to do. Because yeah, with any kind of company or any kind of job or any person in life, you're kind of navigating things and you're getting feedback from all these different kind of sources. And there's like a top combination of an entrepreneur or heading a company or heading anything where, you're trying to be directive, but also, flexible and working with people. But I think if you're solving for something new, yeah, I think not being apologetic of what you believe and really what's about, because there's no one with a roadmap to tell you something. I think like feedback and advice is so useful. I've learned so much from that, but you're just taking those as inputs. And if you really feel something and believe in something, I don't think there's a reason to doubt that, or not even doubt that, but I do feel like I wish at times and I still tell myself that, oh, don't be apologetic of what we're doing and trying to do. Just gotta do that. That's the less, that's the least thing to worry about. Yeah.
I think that's a really good lesson. I feel when you say that, I can think of moments in time in my career,
Mm,
actually many moments
mm,
where I was too apologetic,
mm.
and probably because of that ended up going down a direction that I probably knew wasn't the right direction,
Yeah.
or my, maybe I didn't know, but my gut was telling me, you know, it's hard though, I think, because especially depending on the type of leader you are, but if you're not a dictator,
Yeah, totally. It's
which
hard. Yeah.
you are definitely not. I'm
Yeah.
not. I actually am not sure how to. Sometimes someone would give you. I don't know if this. I'm trying to see if this resonates with you, because this sometimes someone says, I'm like, I want to do this. Their response is, well, no, based on the data and based on all this information, we really need to do this, and the whole team thinks that we need to do this, and now I have to veto
Right. Totally.
an entire team, the data, right? Is that
Yeah, exactly. Especially if, yeah, and how to balance that or other things where it's like, let's say things, a lot of what Pursuit works on, like cross industry, for example, or let's say even like our capital stack, right? Yeah. It's kind of, there are other people doing it, but there's donations. We have, so like literal donors versus investors that we generate returns from. We have a nonprofit, we have different entities around that. So even the idea of like blending capital, let's say we get advice from the experts on philanthropy versus kind of,
mm,
raising something around like, if we're about, or if we're trying to integrate these things as an example, or there's other ones where we're about integrating these kind of practices to achieve what we're trying to do. Um, Sometimes there's tensions around that, or just people have their view, right, on their specialty. And so a part of our job, any CEO job or any leader job or any individual job is like taking those things and trying to understand. I think by the nature of how at least I approach things and pursue, there's a lot of that from, and people have their slice of like
mm,
of what
mm.
what they're doing, and I think that sometimes it's and one can't expect a person to understand those cross lots of those things. So there may be reasons why, but they're like, oh, a person is an expert, or I really trust this person's opinion on this thing, but that may or may not translate to these other things. They've been very successful at whatever they've been doing.
Hmm.
And sometimes that might translate, but actually sometimes this other thing that's close, but it's actually just so different, actually, you know?
And you're really in the CEO seat. I mean, you're the person who sees. You may not be the expert in any individual slice, if you will, but you're seeing across the whole thing horizontally, right?
Exactly. So trying to really do that is both I think something that I've enjoyed but it's also a huge challenge. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. So let's talk a little bit. I think especially for the space you're in, um, if we think about the future and we think about AI and we think about the changes that that's going to make to the world and engineering, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, it's a huge challenge, and every kind of business and is obviously thinking about it. Um, in some ways it changes what we do, in other ways it's not. I think about it, maybe broadly in three ways. One is like, what's the content that people need to understand to approach LLMs and AI more broadly? Two, what's the nature of jobs? So what's the nature of software engineering jobs going to be in the future? And then three, what are the tools that can enhance or that we utilize, whether to do our work better, or how does that change there? So related, but all kind of different. I do think, yeah, obviously engineering is fundamentally changing. Um,
Hmm.
there's some existential not existential for us necessarily, because I think actually it's not what our main value is, but for lots of things is syntax matter anymore? Like I've said, but I've always believed that, like that, if a computer or can create, syntax and script better than a human can, what's the purpose of those things, right? How do we fundamentally think about that? And I've always believed that's not the first order problem that we're solving for if we're focused on blue collar workers, these other thing around jobs, but that is a huge challenge and a new way of thinking. So, I do think we need to pretty try to transform what we're doing and really thinking about it as a tool versus yeah, thinking about we are the ones like inputting and writing
Hmm.
everything. I think there's lots more like synthesizing information, and this can become, humans leaning on more us doing what we're good at, you know, like what we hear from employers, for example, on the job for our fellows. It's rarely can this person code or challenges around that once a person on the job. It's all about, well, is it solving? How do you apply that to business problems? Can you communicate? Can you work
Mm.
with others? Right? Because ultimately, businesses or any kind of product, it's like all the people stuff is really hard, and I think that is not going to go away if you're thinking about jobs and careers, even with the introduction of AI. So that is a big value of what we're creating. How do we do that? That should apply for many different kinds of jobs, and even with however technology changes.
It's actually what you said in the beginning, right? Is someone could go watch YouTube videos to learn how to code, and it's not really. I mean, that's not really what this is about.
Exactly. So we have to even lean more into that. Exactly. Yeah.
What are you most excited about for the future of Pursuit?
We've I think, been doing it for for what's a long time and a short time. It's hard to tell. I mean, it's been 13 years and 10 years for our training. And that's a long time, right? But thinking about what we're trying to solve for, our main North Star KPI is how do we create incremental increase in someone's lifetime income? So if not for pursuit, what would someone's income
Mm,
be? And then what are we doing around that? So in the US for college versus non-college, it's about a $2 million difference if you have a 4-year degree than if you don't in someone's life. And from what we're doing for our program, we can project it makes it, if you're successful in getting a job, that's a $2 million more income you can earn in your life, right? So that really
totally.
translates
Wow.
things, right? And so thinking about that, right? If you're really trying to do that, if we're really trying to do that, what's a lifetime or career span? That's measured over, 20, 30, 40 years, right? 30, 25, 30 years
Mm,
typically. So it's a pretty long time horizon. And so what's interesting is that for our training, it's been 10 years. So now we're actually, that's could be both a long time but a short time. Our cycles are that we do community engagement. There's definitely a year and a half of training. Then it's 3 years on the job. Because the goal is not if you're trained, that if you get a job, but really, if you're 3 years on the job, that means no longer a job, it becomes a career. So our cycles are 4 to 5 years, right? if you're 3 years in a job in your career, that's how then we estimate and have confidence that this will be a permanent shift for the 20, 30 years. So thinking about that, we've had these cycles now, 4 to 5 year cycles. And at 10 years of training, we actually really see not just the first job, but the second and third job and what that means. And you're really starting to see the career data and what that means. So I think
Whoa,
that's, yes, I
cool.
think that's really, yeah, it's
That's
actually
cool.
better match the problem we're solving for. Because with anything, like what are we solving? What is anyone solving for? Right? There's many different things where, so our cycles are around that. It's about people's lives. It's actually pretty long cycles matched to people's lives. So what I'm excited about is we have what are our lessons there and how do we celebrate that? And how can that in the next 10 years think about how that applies for jobs overall and for there's going to be probably a lot of change in our lifetime, right? Whether AI or energy transition or all these other things, which mean that the work is going to continue to change. And so if we're tackling some things that are fundamental, I think there's a set of lessons that we've built over the past 10 years, and hopefully that can be productized and that can be a path to really scaling what we're doing, but also, enabling many, many more people.
I love it. So if people want to find out more about Pursuit or want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can, check out our website, pursuit.org and also pursuit.com, both work. You can drop me a line at Jukay at pursuit.com.
Awesome. Jukay, thank you so much. I really appreciate you making the time to speak with me and for sharing your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And for those of you that are listening, I hope Jukay's story resonated with you, that you learned something that you can bring back to your organizations, or maybe just something that makes you feel like you're not alone in the challenges you're facing on your journey. And if you enjoyed the episode, we'd love if you share it with your network. Thank you so much, and see you next time for another episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.